one question I really want to know, what are the government's regulation around in vitro fertilization, intracytoplasmic sperm injection? What what are what are the things to watch out for? What can be done? What cannot be done around all these techniques?
Yeah, I mean, that's another very important question. For instance, for any IVF clinic to even operate here in the United States, you have to be licensed, right? So there are different regulatory bodies that we go through. There's CAPS, there's JCO, right? Um, so normally every 2 years, an IVF lab has to be reevaluated and reaccredited, basically. All right, and that's not even to do with the Florida Health Board because I'm in the state of Florida. All right, so every clinician has to be licensed by their respective board. For instance, I'm licensed by the board of Florida. They've got Florida Board of Clinical Laboratory. I mean, clinical laboratory personnel. This is a long name.
Mhm.
Florida Board of Clinical Laboratory Personnel. There's a Florida Board of Medicine, Florida Board of Nursing, right? So for every group that works in the IVF, like the nurses, the medical assistants, the doctors, they all have to be board certified. I mean, some people might just be on their way getting there, sometimes some embryologists are still in training, but they still have to be under supervision up until the point where they get their board certifications and their licensure. All right. So every IVF clinic has to be, reaccredited every 2 years, right? So the accrediting body will send their inspectors. That's what they're called, right? So they will go through all of your SOPs, your manual, your quality control papers and assurances. So they will reevaluate everything book page by page just to ensure that you're working up to standard in the industry. Of course, there are still lapses here and there because we get to hear of all those lawsuits like there's a wrong embryo being transferred, there is a wrong sperm being used. I mean, those are human errors. And because, I mean, when we are doing those board exams, we take those continuing education courses that we have to pass as well. One of the things we also work on is human errors or something. I've forgotten the title of that's the course that we have to do. So, and there are mitigations in place. For instance, there is a technology we also use in the embryology lab that is called it's a witnessing application. For instance, before I get to inject an egg with a sperm, I have to have an assistant, a second embryologist or andrologist that will ensure that they witness the sperm I'm picking that I'm taking from. They check the name, they check the label. I say, okay, I'm about to inject this egg with so and so sperm. Can you ID the name for me? So the person has to witness before we use. So there are instances where maybe there are not such checks and balances in some labs. Maybe the embryologist has been overworked, all right? Or maybe they don't just have adequate number of staff that is supposed to work in that clinic, for instance. So there are instances where some errors might be made indeed, but then when they start auditing them, they start finding the loopholes that, okay, you didn't go through this step, you didn't witness the step. Maybe that's why the error occurred. And it goes into several millions of dollars in lawsuits sometimes. So, I mean, the prayer of every embryologist is never to make a mistake, but mistakes are sometimes, I mean, they sometimes happen, but we try as much as possible to do our best possible not to make such mistake because they could be fatal. Imagine you being a black couple and you discover that you're giving birth to a Chinese baby, or you're giving birth
Mm.
to a white baby. Start asking her, madam, what happened? Did you see another man during the process, and things like that. So it's always very challenging. And when the investigators get to pinpoint it down to the IVF lab, then it becomes a big legal suit. I mean, and so many bad things happen. So we used to feel bad for labs and embryologies that maybe have fallen, I mean, short in some instances. But then with come to be compassionate. Maybe it's just a human error that could just have been avoidable. Maybe if the right technology was in place or the right witnessing was in place, and things like that. So errors can occur, but the rate at which they occur should be minimal. I mean, even close to zero. You shouldn't have any critical error, all right, like that happening in the embryology lab or an IVF clinic like that, because it destroys reputation. Some clinics have to shut down because nobody's going to want to go to that clinic anymore because of the bad PR that it generates and things like that. So that's why even the United States is trying to see what other regulations they can put in place. Maybe at the end of the day, they'll mandate every clinic to have a witnessing application in place, such that even if there's not a second embryologist, when we are trying to do some procedures, because we tag our dishes with RFID chips and the tubes as well. And when you're trying to go to the next stage of insemination, injection, and you go through all those protocols, if you bring a mismatched embryo or something that doesn't belong to the patient you're working on, the alarm bells will go off. So you're immediately being, drawn back to recheck your process and ensure that you're doing the right thing. So such texts like that may be mandated. All right, and there are texts like if you're freezing an egg so that you don't wrongly choose an egg or biological material that doesn't belong to the patient. They also have those devices we use to freeze them. There's a tech that has RFID chips that actually would alarm you if you have maybe chosen the wrong embryo or chosen the wrong egg in that instance. So the technologies that could also help in those regulatory processes and affairs down the line. But they always warn us and train us to be highly meticulous, at least in that field of practice that we work in